Hi, good morning. Thanks very much everyone for joining us on this hopefully sunny day with everyone. It's certainly sunny here in Lincolnshire, but hopefully the weather is nice where you are as well. Today we're going to be talking through our back in business concept, how to prepare for a return to work. To introduce myself, my name is Natalie Herdwell. I'm the compliance manager here at Stallard Kane. Many of you will be familiar with us, but as an overview, Stallard Kane was established in the year 2000 as a provider of health and safety, HR, and employment law services. Over the years, we've grown and developed, and more recently, we've included the training and compliance departments within our service. You can contact us in a variety of the usual ways. You can find us online at StallardKaneAssociates.com. Give us a call on 01427 678 660 and choose the relevant department, or email us on admin@skaltd.co.uk. Just a bit of housekeeping then for today's webinar. Should you have any questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A function. We'll offer some Q&A time, but if you have any questions as we're going along, we've got a team in the background who should be able to answer anything or point you in the right direction. Should you be having any technical difficulties, please log those on the chat function and we'll do our best to help you via that. And please be aware that a recorded version of the webinar will become available on the Stallard Kane website and on our YouTube page. So, as I said, today's presentations are based on the guide that we've published just recently regarding back in business. Please do have a look on our website for some more information on this. You can download the guide, which is full of useful information and practical advice. While the government advice currently is to continue working from home where you can, you no longer need to be classed as a critical worker to go to work if you can't work from home. Many businesses have successfully continued to operate throughout the various lockdowns that we've gone through, either with their staff full in the office, fully at home, or a mixture of both. But for many, they will be considering a return to a new normal and wondering how they might navigate the rules, regulations, and procedures around this. Many employees are now looking at ways in which to make their workplaces COVID secure, to ensure their employees feel confident and safe to return to the workplace. And that's what I'll be talking about in my presentation. But we'll be starting with some HR and employment law advice from Claudia, one of our senior HR advisors, who will go into a bit more detail on that in her presentation. In the Back in Business guide, there's a variety of health and safety support, including a toolkit of useful documents and templates. And the government has created a manual for working safely during coronavirus. It'll point you towards that as well. It's also worth noting that we offer a bespoke training service and work with all our clients to make sure that they are finding the most suitable and cost-effective solution to their training needs. We offer virtual learning wherever possible, and this is something we will certainly be looking to continue to offer going forward, as for many of our clients, this has been a valuable way of delivering courses. Please do check any expiring certificates. During the first lockdown, many awarding bodies offered extensions. However, as other delivery methods do now exist, many of those awarding bodies will not accept expired certificates, as options for renewal are available. Please do contact the training team and they'll be very happy to assist. For now, though, we'll head over to Claudia, who will talk through HR and employment law.
Thanks, Tally. Morning, everybody. Just get my presentation live. There we go. So I am going to kick off today's Back in Business webinar with an update on key HR issues that we anticipate a lot of employers will be facing over the coming months as you're gradually bringing your staff back to work and we're gradually getting back towards some sort of new normal. Give you a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to cover today. First of all, I'm going to give you an update on the government's furlough scheme. I'm then going to go into a bit of an update around the guidance on shielding, The main bulk of my presentation today is going to cover returning to work, how to go about unfurloughing your staff, and also how to address any issues where you've maybe got employees who are concerned about returning to work. And then I'm going to finish off with a bit of an update on workplace testing and also the vaccine and key employment law considerations that we might need to think about when looking at those two things. So I'm going to get straight into it because I'm mindful of time. I've got a lot to cover and not a lot of time to cover it in. So first things first, an update on the furlough scheme. Hopefully by now, everybody is aware that the furlough scheme has been updated until the end of September this year. Now, that extension is absolutely critical. It's fantastic news because it's estimated that around 4 in 10 employers are still relying on the furlough scheme even today. So it's been an absolute lifeline for businesses, and we're very lucky to still have it until at least the end of September. You will be very pleased to know that as far as we're aware, until the end of September, you continue to have the option of placing your employees either on furlough full-time, or you can utilise that flexible furlough scheme and place them on furlough for just a proportion of their working hours. The main update I wanted to run through today is how the government's contributions to this scheme are going to change over the coming months. So, from now until the 30th of June 2021, you can continue to claim up to 80% of your employees' wages for any hours they do not work, up to a maximum of £2,500 per month. So that remains completely the same until the end of June. It's from July that we start to see some changes come into play. So in July, should you furlough an employee, the government will contribute up to 70% of their wages for any time they're furloughed, but you as the employer then become liable for covering 10% of their usual wages. So if an employee is furloughed in July, they still receive 80% of their salary, the only difference being 10% of that now comes from the employer rather than the government. Then in August and September, we see those government contributions reduce once again. So throughout the months of August and September, the government will contribute just 60% of your staff's wages. And as an employer, you must cover the final 20%. So we can see how over the coming months, as the furlough scheme gradually comes to an end, the government's contributions are gradually reducing. Final point I wanted to make on here is that for the duration of the scheme, from now right through to the end of September, you are always liable for covering the costs of your employees' pension and national insurance contributions. That aspect will not change. The final thing I wanted to just mention with regards to a furlough update, because it's something I've actually read this morning and I thought it was worth noting. The government guidance does now state that employers should be retaining any records you have regarding to furlough for a period of at least 6 years. So any pay records that you have, any letters you sent to staff regarding the furlough scheme, you need to keep those on file for a minimum period of 6 years. So that nicely covers the key things you need to know with regards to the furlough scheme. Obviously, that furlough scheme has been used to support a variety of people in a variety of different circumstances. But one group of people who particularly may have been reliant on the furlough scheme is those who had been advised to shield in line with government guidance. Bit of an update on shielding. If you weren't already aware, the government's advice to shield actually came to an end on the 31st of March 2021. So if you did have any employees who were on that shielding list, they should have received a letter within the last few weeks notifying them that the advice to shield has come to an end and that they can now follow all of the national restrictions and guidelines in line with the rest of the population. However, these individuals are still strongly advised to take extra precautions. So that means that they still need to keep their social contacts to an absolute minimum, and they need to be following the government social distancing guidelines as strictly as possible. So what does that mean for you as an employer? Well, people are still advised to continue working from home wherever possible. That advice is in place, not just for those who were previously on the shielding list, but for the whole population in general. So work from home wherever you possibly can, even if that means making a few adjustments to your staff's work so that they can do it from home. But ultimately, if it's physically not possible for that individual to work from home, you can now have them return to work. So moving on to the bulk of my presentation today, and let's talk about that return to work in general. As I just reiterated, first things first, wherever you possibly can, you should still have employees working from home if possible. The government have committed to reviewing this later on in the year. However, these guidelines will be in place until at least June. So work from home wherever you possibly can. However, of course, with the restrictions gradually lifting, we've just seen on Monday a big bulk of those restrictions lift. There, of course, will now be employers who are asking staff to return to work. And potentially you might be asking people to come back to work after what could have been months and months and months sat at home on furlough. The first thing I wanted to talk about is how you should go about unfurloughing your employees if they have been off work for a prolonged period of time. First step, our advice would be to write to your employees confirming that their furlough is going to come to an end and confirming what date you expect them to return to work. So confirm all of that in writing, and where you can, you should be giving your staff as much notice as possible of that return to work date. We recommend 48 working hours notice as an absolute minimum, but if you can give more notice, please make sure that you do. Once you've confirmed their expected return to work date, the next thing that we need to do is consider what information we are going to communicate to staff with regards to that return to work and the processes and procedures you've got in place to ensure their safety. As I've said here, staff may be very anxious about returning. As employers, we need to make sure we have listened to their concerns. Now, the ACAS guidelines have recently been updated, and they actually now place an obligation on employers to consult with employees regarding the health and safety measures you have put in place in response to the pandemic. The best way to go about that consultation is by ensuring thorough communication with staff before they come back to the workplace. So, once you have written to your employees confirming their expected return to work date, our advice would be to include with that letter a little bit of a return to work pack. So you could look at including things such as any updated policies, any updated procedures, copies of your COVID-19 risk assessments, and also any other information about how the workplace might have changed so that they can prepare before they come back to work. By giving your employees all of that information in a little pack with a covering letter, it gives them a chance to read and digest that information before they're coming back to work. And if they do have any concerns, they have an opportunity to raise those with you before they're back in the workplace. It could also be that employees actually read your risk assessments and pick up on things that maybe as an employer we've overlooked or we've not thought about, and we can then discuss how we're going to manage those before that return to work date arrives. So as I say there, employees should be given a good opportunity to raise any concerns ahead of returning. And hopefully by going through that process, it means that we can offer reassurance to staff and we can reduce those anxieties before they come back to work. Now, of course, there are potentially going to be cases where even after taking all of those steps, it might be that you have some employees who are refusing to return to the workplace. So I wanted to take some time today to discuss how we can manage that, how we should respond, and what we can do. Ultimately, you are going to need to address concerns on a case-by-case basis. Now, to start off this discussion, I just wanted to make you all aware of key employment law legislation that underpins this area. So a few things to be aware of. Number one, under the Employment Rights Act, any employee who raises concerns about their health and safety at work and who is either dismissed or treated at a detriment for doing so does have the right to take that case to the employment tribunal. In addition to that, any employee who raises a concern about their health and safety at work could argue that in doing so, they are making a protected disclosure. Effectively, that means that they're whistleblowing, and so they then receive protection under the whistleblowing legislation. And again, if they are dismissed or if they are treated less favourably for blowing the whistle, they have the potential to take the claim to an employment tribunal. That is why our communication around health and safety measures that we've put in place are going to be absolutely vital. Now, one of the main questions that we receive when dealing with staff who don't want to return to work, the first thing the employer comes and says to us is, can I discipline them for refusing to come to the workplace? Unfortunately, like a lot of things in HR and employment law, it is not a black and white answer. The answer is, potentially, you could discipline them. But really, it depends on their individual circumstances, and it depends on their reasons for being worried about returning to work. Provided there are no discrimination issues, provided you can evidence that you have satisfactory control measures in place to reduce the risk to staff, and provided that that employee does not have a valid reason for refusing to return, you potentially could treat their refusal as refusing to follow a reasonable management instruction and therefore go down a route of disciplinary. However, it is absolutely vital that before considering any formal action, you understand why that person doesn't want to return. What are their individual reasons? Like I say, each case will be turned based on its own facts. So that's the first thing we need to do, is understand their reasons. So before taking any sort of formal action, we should be, number one, communicating with employees. Number two, consulting with them about the measures that we've put in place, hear their feedback, listen to any concerns that they might have, assess their individual circumstances, and then wherever you can, if you can put some sort of support or adjustments in place to encourage them to return to work, we should be looking at doing that first before we consider disciplining anyone for refusing. So a really simple example, if you have a member of staff who says, I don't want to come back to work because if I do, I'm going to have to take a train at 8 o'clock in the morning during rush hour, and that really worries me. A simple adjustment would be to agree a temporary change to their working hours to enable them to take an earlier train or a later train so that they can avoid that rush hour traffic. So always consider if there's small things that you can do first to try and alleviate that individual's concerns before considering formal action. Now, one common circumstance that I think might arise, and even to date, one of the biggest reasons why people have been refusing to come back to work, it tends to be people who have underlying health conditions themselves. And if they were to catch COVID, they are at increased risk. It tends to be that group of people who are most anxious and worried about coming back to work. So let's consider how we should respond to that. If an individual saying, I have a health condition, I don't think it's safe for me to come back, what should we do? The first thing to consider is that these individuals are most likely to have a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. So under that act, those individuals have a right to not be treated at a detriment as a result of their underlying health condition or disability. And also, the Equality Act places huge obligation on the employer to put support and adjustments in place wherever possible. So, especially with these individuals, if we started to look to take formal action against them for refusing to return to work, not only do we risk an unfair dismissal or a whistleblowing claim, but there is also risk of a claim for discrimination. Those are all three really big points of concern that we really need to consider before proceeding. To summarise, an employer should listen to an employee's concerns, take steps to keep everybody safe at work, reassure staff by telling them how the workplace is made safe, put support and adjustments in place wherever possible. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more guidance around, first of all, how to go about unfurloughing staff and all of the information that we need to be providing, And then second of all, gives you a little bit more awareness around employees' rights and the potential risks that could be associated with how you respond to any one individual that's not comfortable coming back to the workplace. The bottom line is, if you do have anybody who's refusing and you are not able to put support and adjustments in place to encourage them to come back, please seek advice before you decide to take formal action against any individual. We can support you to assess their personal circumstances and to help you determine what might be a reasonable response in the circumstances. Unfortunately, it's not a black and white answer, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more awareness and guidance of where to begin. So that covers the return to work. The very last thing that I wanted to talk about today was vaccinations and also workplace testing. In the HR department over the last few weeks and months, we've had quite a lot of questions on these two things. So to start off with, I'll start with vaccinations. Biggest question that we've been asked is, can an employer make it mandatory for an employee to have a vaccination before they return to work? The first thing to consider when looking at this is that the government has made it very, very clear that a vaccination is not a legal requirement. Therefore, whilst you might be in favour of your employees having the vaccine because it's going to reduce their risk once they return to work, unfortunately, currently, employers are not in a position to be able to force an employee to have the vaccine. There are going to be people who are very concerned about taking the vaccine and who might choose not to have it for a variety of reasons. Therefore, forcing somebody to have the vaccine or having policies that places somebody at a detriment for not having it could result in, first of all, breaching their human rights, but also discrimination claims again, depending on the circumstances. What we need to keep in mind is that whilst the vaccine reduces that individual's risk of experiencing severe symptoms should they catch COVID, the vaccine does not prevent that individual catching COVID themselves and still passing it on to others. So regardless of how many of your employees have been vaccinated, all of your other health and safety control measures are still going to be absolutely essential. So that includes your social distancing, the wearing of face masks, hand sanitizer. All of those things are far more effective in reducing the risk of spread to staff. And no employer should be relying on the vaccine as a control measure alone. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you will be sat there thinking about all the big cases that we've seen in the news where certain employers have taken quite a bold stance on this, and they have made the decision to bring in policies such as no jab, no job. What I would say is that a lot of these businesses are claiming that from a health and safety perspective, they have grounds to enforce that. Potentially they do. However, it does not come without its risks from an employment law point of view. Ultimately, we are not going to know how the tribunal will respond to cases like this until it's actually been tested in the courts. I personally would not want for any one of my clients, who most of you are small to medium-sized businesses, where a tribunal claim is going to have a really, really huge impact. I would not want any one of you to become a test case. So until that's been tested in a tribunal and until we have a little bit more guidance on this aspect, our advice is that employers cannot force any employee to have a vaccine. Moving on to workplace testing. Hopefully everybody's aware that all businesses across in England had the opportunity to sign up to the government's workplace testing programme, and your deadline for applying was actually Monday. If you've missed that deadline and you're still considering wanting to introduce COVID tests in the workplace, there are lots of private organisations who can provide that service. Just a quick Google search will bring them up. The only difference, of course, is that you will have to pay for that service through those private organisations. But under the government's scheme, all employers will receive free lateral flow tests for their employees, and those tests can detect cases of COVID in less than 30 minutes. So it is going to be a really fantastic tool for you to detect COVID and break chains of transmission wherever possible. Now, from an employment law point of view, if you are planning on introducing tests on your employees, you first of all need to consult with your staff with a view of seeking their agreement to having a test. During that consultation, you need to be explaining to your employees how the testing will work, how staff will get their test results, and also what will happen in the event that any employee tests positive. There's also a lot of GDPR considerations to take into account, so you need to be telling your employees how you plan to use, store, and also delete their testing data in line with the GDPR regulations. It's quite a lot of information there that we need to provide to staff. The best way of doing that is by putting together some sort of a workplace testing policy. Now, you'll be very pleased to know that we do have a template workplace testing policy that we've pulled together. So if there are any clients out there who have signed up to the programme or who are looking at testing employees, please get in touch with your HR advisor and we will be able to provide a copy of that workplace testing policy. And I believe that a copy is also available on the website in our COVID-19 Back in Business pack. Just like with the vaccine, if an employee does not agree to being tested, first of all, you need to listen to their concerns, try and understand why, and offer them reassurance. But ultimately, there's no way that an employer can make COVID-19 tests compulsory for anyone. As I said before, all of those other health and safety control measures you've got in place, your social distancing, your masks, your sanitizer, all of those things are going to be essential and much more important in reducing the risk of spread to staff. So that's everything from me today. I'm very mindful of the fact that I've been talking for quite a while, so I'm not going to take any live questions. However, I'm going to remain in the background of the webinar. I'm going to hand back to Tally now, who's going to do a compliance update for us, and I'll be sitting here in the background. So if you do have any questions, ping them through on that Q&A function, and myself and a colleague are sat in the background answering questions as and when they come through. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Tally.
Thank you, Claudia. Some really useful information there. Right, what I'm going to be talking about today is some practical guidance with regards to getting back into work. As I said, I'm Natalie Herdwell and I'm the Compliance Manager here at Stellard Kane, and this is what I'm going to be talking to you about today. What should we be thinking as we are getting back into the new normal? As more and more businesses start to reopen and employers start to consider their employees' return, or at least their partial return to the workplace, there are some practical steps that we need to consider. There are restart grants being made available to select businesses, as well as discretionary business grant funding available via local authorities. But in terms of practical advice regarding your business infrastructure, that's what we're looking to discuss here. There's a really good amount of detailed information available on the government website regarding all these topics, but the areas we're going to concentrate on I've set out here, and I'm going to pay particular focus to the areas of fire safety, electrical safety, and air hygiene. Firstly though, cleanliness. The guidance is still very much to remain 2 meters apart wherever possible, but where this is not possible, that has been relaxed to 1 meter plus, where the plus means additional protection, such as a mask, is required. This is designed hopefully to allow more venues, more premises to function. But we've still got to be mindful that additional cleaning procedures are needed. So now's the time to reinvigorate your staff, to sanitize their hands, to regularly clean down touch points, make sure they've got antibacterial wipes on their workspaces to clean down at the end of every day and on a regular basis. But you also, as an employer, need to make sure you've got a robust procedure in place should you need to deal with a COVID outbreak in your workplace. Please do talk to us for more advice on decontamination cleaning, on undertaking regular fogging as part of your cleaning procedures, or any other advice that you might need on that respect. Water hygiene, obviously really important as well, and particularly if you've been closed down for a period of time or if you're looking to reopen at this point. Legionella bacteria itself is commonly found in all water sources and is most readily able to multiply where temperatures in those water sources are between 20 degrees and 45 degrees. The bacteria is dormant below 20 degrees and cannot survive above 60 degrees. So temperature control is often the primary method used to control risk in this instance. Where that's not been possible to manage and monitor on a regular basis, or where that's something that you're unable to manage in-house, it's really important to ensure that a competent person is routinely checking, inspecting, and where necessary, cleaning the water system in your premises in accordance with your Legionella risk assessment and the control measures that you set out in your written scheme of control. If this has been the case during lockdown, you may have been managing really well, and that's great. If, however, there hasn't been the opportunity to regularly flush your system or monitor the water temperatures in your building, it is advisable to look at testing water samples for the presence of Legionella and other bacteria. Please get in touch with us in the compliance team to arrange water sampling, should that be required, to review your written scheme of controls and ensure you've got all the necessary logbooks in place, or if you need to arrange a risk assessment for your property. Fire safety then, obviously something that we're all very mindful of. If you've been away from your premises or only partially attending the workplace, it's possible that certain maintenance tasks or procedures might have fallen by the wayside. If you're going into a new premises because you've changed the way that you're working, or if you've got new members of staff in, you really need to be kind of looking at some of these items here. Fire extinguishers, if you've got an annual service contract in place, I'm sure you've probably been contacted by your service provider, but should that not be the case, or should that have been cancelled, really need to reinvigorate that. Extinguishers should be serviced on an annual basis, as I say, but it's also important to remember that most extinguishers only have a shelf life of 5 years. Carbon dioxide extinguishers have a shelf life of 10 years, but for all the rest, it's 5 years. And at that point, you need to be looking at an extended service for those appliances or looking to replace them. Your fire doors as well. This is something you're probably quite mindful of when you're in your business on a regular basis. But if you've been away for a while, just refresh that thought in your mind. Are all your fire doors functional? Are they opening and closing properly? Are they easy to use? And are they accessible? Has anything been stored in front of them within the premises or outside? Make sure that you've really got that confidence in your fire doors to limit the spread of fire if there was a fire situation in your building, or to help people to escape safely. Training and staff awareness is also really important. You may have designated fire wardens within your workplace. If they're not coming back into work on a regular basis, they're on a different rotation, perhaps to other staff. You might want to look at doing some additional staff awareness on the fire warden side of things. How to fight a fire, how to raise the alarm in the event of a fire, the use of fire extinguishers, all of that sort of thing is covered in the fire warden awareness training that the training department here are able to arrange for you. So please do get in touch with them regarding that. Emergency lighting is part of the British standard to make sure that you are carrying out a monthly flick test in your building. This is done in-house in most instances, though we can carry out that for you should you need. And that's really just to check on a regular basis that all of your luminaires are working, that you've got sufficient light in all your escape routes, in all the necessary areas, by call points, by fire extinguishers, that sort of thing. And you also need to make sure you're having your annual discharge test carried out. That means if you've got a 3-hour system, you need to be discharging it for the full 3 hours to make sure that it not only operates for that amount of time, but then can restart again afterwards. Again, that's checking that all the luminaires work, repairing and replacing them anywhere that might be necessary. Again, that's something that we can look at for you, so please do get in touch. The fire alarm system, again, you should be carrying out weekly tests in-house to make sure that the system is functional and that all the sounders are working as they should, that everyone can hear the fire alarm and is aware of what it should be sounding like. That should be being serviced on a 6-monthly basis. So make sure you have got that test scheduled in, as soon as possible if it's overdue. Fire risk assessment as well. This is something obviously Starlight Kane carry out for our clients. If you need a new one doing because you've changed your processes, your buildings, etc. If you don't have one in place, get in touch and we can get that done. They should also be being reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that all your actions are covered, all your right procedures are in place. So again, that's something that you really want to be mindful of at this point in time. So fire safety is a real key thing in the workplace, and these are all the sorts of actions that you want to be thinking about. Electrical safety. Obviously, again, there's been a lot of questions recently about how to manage electrical safety both at home and in the office. If you've got people who are purely doing one or the other or a mixture of both, there's certain things that need to be considered. Portable appliance testing has now officially been redesignated as electrical appliance testing. And that's really intended to reiterate the importance of ensuring that your electrical appliances are safe to use. An EICR, an electrical installation condition report or fixed wire test, will verify that your installation is safe as far as the connection point for any equipment, but it's important to then take that next step and ensure that the electrical equipment itself, whether it's fixed or whether it's portable, is also tested. Working from home's really tested the portable side of things, and people have taken home monitors, laptops, computers, maybe printers in some cases. If that's all now being brought back into the workplace, now's the time to do that retesting. If you've still got people working from home, it's important to consider how you're going to approach testing their equipment. Advice for your employees in that sense is on how to work safely from home is crucial, but also maintaining the inventory of your equipment is really, really important. Make sure you know what you've got and where it is, and make sure you're having it tested on a regular basis. We are a team of national engineers, so we can attend any central workplace if needed, with appointments made for your home-based employees to come into the workspace for testing to be carried out. Or what we're doing for a lot of our clients is testing employees' equipment at their home addresses, making sure that's all centrally logged on the inventory of equipment with all the appropriate test results, and testing all their appliances from home. We're also looking at, just went too far, electrical safety at home. It's really important to reiterate some sensible guidance with your employees if they're continuing to work from home. Unfortunately, a huge percentage of domestic fires are caused by electrical faults, so it's important not to get complacent. We obviously can't complete a fire risk assessment for each of your employees' homes. So as employers, you must remember to give sensible advice and similar advice as you would in the workplace to how your employees are working at home. Housekeeping, for example, is something that nearly always comes up. Make sure your workspace is tidy, that cables are kept neatly, that you're not overloading sockets by plugging in laptops, monitors, phone chargers all into one place, as this will cause cables to overheat and can damage the insulation in the cables over time. The best way to avoid electrical fires is to not overload sockets and obviously keeping the use of extension leads to a minimum. So the next subject I wanted to talk about is air hygiene and the real importance of good ventilation. The Health and Safety Executive and CIBSE have together published some really useful guidance on the subject of ventilation and in general working safely during the COVID pandemic. Anyone who's had a call recently from a HSE inspector will know that they're putting particular interest on ensuring that you're aware of the requirements for good ventilation and that you've got robust procedures in place. Essentially, what we're looking for is to maximize the fresh air in a space, either by natural or mechanical means. Passive airflow through windows, doors, vents, etc., that can be opened, or using fans and ducts to bring fresh air in from outside is really important. As part of making sure your workplace is COVID secure, you should be considering ventilation as one of the means to reduce the risk of transmissions. Aerosol transmission of a virus within an enclosed area is a greater risk in areas that are poorly ventilated. So ensuring you're providing adequate ventilation with fresh air and limiting the number of people in any one given area is really important. Again, there's more advice on these subjects on the Health and Safety website, or please do give us a call to talk through in more detail. But if you're using natural ventilation, like doors and windows, you've obviously got to consider the outside atmosphere and your general location. It's a lot more appropriate to obviously open, as many doors and windows as you can if you're in a rural setting, or away from motorways and busy places where you might get pollution inside. But it's the natural ventilation and that fresh air that we're really looking for. Also very aware that whilst it might be sunny, it's not particularly warm. We've had a lot of reports recently from schools, for example, where the windows for each classroom are all fully open to allow for that fresh air, but the students are sat inside in their coats because they're cold. It might sound counterproductive, but make sure the heating's on. Make sure you're talking to your team about the fact that it's important to keep the windows open so that they can account for that potentially in the way they dress. We always need to be looking at basing our ventilation rates on the maximum normal capacity of any given room. If you're using mechanical ventilation, it's really important to understand how your ventilation systems are operating. If the operating times of that system are set purely to when somebody is in a room, you'll never get the opportunity to potentially air an occupied room in the same way as you would with natural ventilation. Look at extending, therefore, the operating times of that system to before or after people are using the work areas, just to give it that extra boost of fresh air. On the other side of things, if you're using recirculation systems, they can remain in use provided there's a supply of outdoor air, i.e. use that recirculation system, but make sure the windows are all open as well. Air conditioning that's designed to either heat or cool an area can really mask poor ventilation, as they're usually based on recirculating air. But if you're bringing fresh air in and warming or cooling that up, obviously they can still be used. You can go a step further and look at local air cleaning and filtration units to reduce airborne transmission of aerosols where it's not possible to maintain adequate ventilation. But these are not substitutes, and you should still prioritise those poorly ventilated areas for improvement before looking at air cleaning devices. There's some interesting case studies in the theatre and concert venues where they've used the time that they've been closed to revisit their ventilation systems and ensure that what they're using is a fresh air handling units, those sorts of things, to make sure that they can get people back into those spaces safely by maximising the amount of fresh air that's being brought into those enclosed spaces. Obviously, the other thing to really be paying particular attention to is making sure that it's all clean. Air handling, air conditioning, ductwork, all of those sorts of things need to be cleaned on a regular basis. The Workplace Health and Safety and Welfare Regulations, within Regulation 6 ventilation, it states that effective and suitable provision should be made to ensure that every enclosed workplace is ventilated by a sufficient quality of fresh or purified air. The associated code of practice with that states that mechanical ventilation systems, including air conditioning, for example, should be regularly and adequately cleaned, as well as properly testing and maintaining it to ensure they're kept clean and free from anything. You should be looking at, investigating further and make sure that there's no contaminants in there. The use of nitrogen cleaning, for example, helps to kill off any kind of bugs and nasties that might be able to contaminate the air that your employees are breathing. But as you can see in the pictures here, ductwork that is full of dust, mold and spores are particulates that would then be just dissipated around your employees should you be using ductwork to pump fresh air into their workplace, which is again counterproductive. So if no one's got any questions at this point, I will have a look at the Q&As and we'll get those sent out to people. But please do get in touch with us after this session or at your leisure on compliance@skaltd.co.uk, or calling the main number and choosing option 5. That will get you through to the team. So in summary for today, thanks again to Claudia for her time and that useful overview of kind of key issues within the HR and employment law field. That was really useful, and that's certainly there'll be any questions that were asked there will be published after this. We'll make this recording available via the Stella Kane website and on our YouTube page, but should there be any questions, please do get in touch. Thanks again to everyone for attending today, and hopefully we'll see you again at another webinar very soon. Thanks very much.